Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa, and if you're new here, you want to learn more about astrology, or if you're open to learning about the subject and you want to learn more about yourself and about the world and about life, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel that I'm trying to grow at the moment, and make sure you give this video a like too if you find it informative. And let's get started in today's video, which is going to be about Mercury retrograde. So for the retrograde series, I'm going to be going into what it means to have that planet retrograde in your birth chart, as well as what it feels like when that planet is retrograding in transit. And if you're unfamiliar, what transits are is just how the planetary bodies are moving in the sky right now. You've all heard about Mercury retrograde, whether you were into astrology or not. It's just become this thing that it's everywhere in pop culture now. You just read about Mercury retrograde everywhere, and it's just this term that's like thrown around by everybody. But what does it really mean? So in astrology, Mercury is the way that you communicate, and it's the way that you think, all right? So it's how people connect with each other through either written or verbal communication, and it's your thinking processes, it's how you learn, basically all forms of communication. And nowadays we have almost limitless forms of communication, whether that's through the internet or through text or through magazines, through newspapers, books. So those are some of the things that Mercury rules over, as well as short-term travel. So when a planet goes retrograde, what it really means is that the associations linked with that planet are kind of like turned inward. They're you need to be a little bit more cautious when dealing with those things in your life. So for example, in the case of Mercury, you want to be careful with how you communicate during Mercury retrograde, or when you are born with Mercury retrograde, you might be someone who is very cautious about how you express yourself and about how you think. You go over and over and over your own thoughts, and you sort of like ruminate more than the average person, because you don't easily jump into certain ways of thinking, or you don't easily express your opinions or your thoughts, unless other things are going on in your chart that do support that. But generally, Mercury retrograde is going to have you sort of like internalize your thoughts more often than not, and you're the type of person who will definitely think for a long time first before proceeding with taking action on something, or proceeding with just saying what you want to say. So if you have Mercury retrograde in your natal chart, you might be someone who is a little bit more hesitant with expressing your thoughts. You might be someone who really thinks long and hard first before deciding what it is you want to say, or really letting your thoughts be out there. So, and at the same time, you might be very careful with how with just the words that you choose to express yourself. I also kind of see Mercury retrograde people as definitely more of the writers than the speakers. These are the people who really need to prepare long and hard first before they make a speech, or before they have to present something in class, for example. Probably most likely don't like being put on the spot and just having to just talk off the top of their heads. They're definitely deeper thinkers. They read between the lines. They understand that not everything is always laid out on the surface, because it's the same way with them. They are the types of people who will not always express exactly what they're thinking or what they're feeling, and so they're very familiar with the concept that things aren't always what they seem, and so they tend to dig deeper. They look deeper. They recognize that there are deeper patterns in life and deeper messages behind everything. If you have Mercury retrograde in your natal chart, you might also be somebody who just constantly is second guessing themselves, who is just not always 100% sure of where they stand with certain subjects, which is also another reason why they hold back a lot, and they're afraid to just put it out there, what it is that they're thinking or what they're feeling. You might also be the type of person who just has their thoughts and their brain is just constantly on overload. There's just so much activity going on in the brain that for you you understand how much there is going on inside of you, that you need to be careful, that you understand that you need to be careful, and that whatever thoughts are expressed might be misconstrued by others. So you are a lot more careful with choosing your words. And when it comes to like dealing with numbers or facts, or like, you know, inputting information, when dealing with those things, you know, just very heavily like focus intensive work, you're a much more careful person when it comes to like dealing with those facts and figures, and like relaying information to other people. Now, during Mercury retrograde transit, we are asked to be more thoughtful with the words that you choose, to express yourself. As a collective, our thinking processes can be held back a bit, and it's for a good reason, because during this time we're asked to like make sure that we have the correct facts, okay, and make sure that like what we're thinking is not just us quickly jumping to conclusions. You know, it's based on reality, and you know, it's real and concrete. And I think that during Mercury retrograde, that is when we really need to open our eyes and just have our 2 feet on the ground, and not have our heads in the clouds, because that during Mercury retrograde is not the time to be like making things up in your head. We're during any retrograde period, whatever the planet is that's going retrograde, it's all about reviewing, and it's all about slowing down, going over your past mistakes in that area. So during Mercury retrograde, for example, you might start thinking more about like things that you've said before that you might have regretted, or during this time you might actually end up saying things without really thinking. And so the retrograde is telling you, you know, like, how can I say what I really feel in the best way possible, and in a way that is accurately expressing what I really think, and in a way that other people can easily understand. Otherwise, you're kind of we can easily just like have word vomit and like put our foot in our mouth, so to speak. It's easy to do that during Mercury retrograde if we're not careful, and if we're not like heeding the warning of this period. So we want to like think more critically during this time period. We want to, I guess, also like dissect the messages that other people are sending our way. We might not take things at face value quite as easily. We realize that there could be more that is not being said, and so we dig deeper. And also, since Mercury rules over technology as well, we might have many disruptions in our technology, like things that we use every day. For example, communication devices, or just like even our cars. Things can start going crazy. Things can start kind of going crazy with technology. Things stop working. Messages don't go through. Things just like break down right when we need it. And so that tends to happen a lot more often than usual during Mercury retrograde. They say it's a good idea to have like all your information backed up, and just like make sure you're reading the fine print when signing documents, and like, you know, just get your facts straight first before you make any big decisions, as well as like read and reread and re-edit and proofread all of your stuff, because we can easily overlook things in that area, in whatever it is that we're trying to say. Like, it might not be the right words to say or the right way to say it, and so we just need to like keep that in mind during this time. Just a lot of misunderstandings can occur during Mercury retrograde. Like I said, it's also about your learning processes and like how you're understanding things, and so during this time it's going backwards, so messages can easily get lost in translation, or like due to technology like going wrong, for example. Or maybe it's just, you know, the words we choose are not the right ones, and it gets misunderstood that way. So I'm going to do a very quick run through of Mercury through all the signs during its retrograde period. So what would Mercury retrograde in Aries be like? A person might have a huge problem with like just, I think out of all the signs, of just speaking without thinking, and really like just being too forward sometimes with their words or with the words that they choose, and that it ends up hurting other people, or like other people just end up misunderstanding their intentions. And so the Mercury retrograde person could end up like eating their own words, especially in Aries, just because Aries is such a forward-moving sign. It does not like to go backwards. It does not like to slow down. So I feel like Mercury retrograde in Aries, people can really learn that lesson of needing to slow down with their words and with their thinking. That's probably like a really hard lesson that they've had to learn throughout life, just because it's not really a direction that Aries placement is so used to moving in. Now with Mercury retrograde in Taurus, the words that you come up with to express yourself, or like the thoughts that, you know, enter your mind, you might be the type of person who just constantly goes over and over and over their thoughts just to be sure. And so that's one good thing about Mercury retrograde is that you're very good at fact checking. However, it does sometimes prevent you from like making quicker decisions and just like being more decisive with your thought processes. Now with Mercury retrograde in Gemini, if you have this, you might be a little too quick with your words and just be a little gossipy, I want to say, just because it's easy for you to form opinions about things. And if you have this retrograde, the shadow side of Mercury in Gemini is just the side of you that is indecisive, and so you can just end up thinking in like too many, like multiple directions all at once. So it's almost like nothing really gets done, or like you don't really end up knowing where you stand because of your mind is just moving in so many different directions. With Mercury retrograde in Cancer, your way of thinking can be sometimes too clouded by emotion, and you don't always base your opinions on like hard facts or just evidence based from reality. And so a lot of times like your mood and your emotions can end up like clouding your judgment and really influencing your thinking most of the time. So you might have to be more careful with like how you form your opinions or how you think, just because how you feel is constantly like influencing that. With Mercury retrograde in Leo, you might express yourself or your thoughts, your opinions in like a really outlandish manner, and like in a way that's more dramatic than necessary, or you might be somebody who like constantly is trying to get the spotlight through your words, through your storytelling. You might have a way of storytelling that is just a little over the top and dramatic, and it's not always like a 100% truth. And so you might have a tendency to like try to grab attention through that. Now, what if you have Mercury retrograde in Virgo? I think one problem that you might face as with this placement is just over analyzing, like just analyzing to death every little thing. And so that can hold you back from like really learning things properly, because your mind can just sometimes be like in like 200% in overdrive, and like you don't just like take the information and leave and move on to the next thing. Like you're just gonna like analyze it over and over again until it's like dead in the ground. You know, overthinking and just too much worrying is something that you might be faced with. Just, you know, Mercury in Virgo, like, period, is already like an overthinker, and they like to take things apart. But if you have this placement retrograde, like you're even more prone to worrying, just because of that tendency to like continue ruminating. Like even after something is like dead and gone, like you'll just continue to go over it as many times as you want. See, Mercury retrograde in Libra, it's similar to Virgo, just because the tendency to like weigh things over and over in your mind and like not really be able to think clearly because of that, because there are so many options and, you know, so many routes that you can go down. there can be a tendency to just kind of ignore like the ugly truth. So you would prefer to just think about things that you want to think about, and think about things that are like really easy to think about and like just more pleasant, basically. You don't like to deal with uglier thoughts or just cold, hard truth of reality. Now, with Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, the person can be highly suspicious about the information that they're getting from other people, and so they might go overboard with like fact checking as well, and just making sure that the other person isn't like BSing them. They can have a tendency to like judge very quickly before really understanding something. And granted, Mercury in Scorpio they go really deep with trying to understand things and like situations and people, but once they do learn about you, or once they get that message, or like get to the very bottom of things, like there's a tendency to just judge and like write people off very easily and very quickly just from that one thing that they didn't like. And so like the mind and the opinions can just be super extreme and be very like cut and dry with Mercury and Scorpio. And instead of like weighing things out, giving people a chance, or just trying to understand from like an empathetic perspective rather than from a judging one. With Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, the communication can be a little bit exaggerated, really similar to Mercury in Leo. But with Mercury in Sag, the tendency here can be to give the impression that they know more than everybody else. And Sagittarius is the sign of a teacher, and it's all about spreading knowledge and information. However, if you have it retrograde, it's like your opinion is the end all be all of everything. And another tendency I think is also just to jump too quickly to try to learn things. Being like their symbol is the archer. It's like the bow and arrow, and it's just trying to shoot straight towards the intended target. So if you have Mercury retrograde in Sag, you might be too eager or too impatient to like get to the bottom of things without really fact checking. And this is another sign that can be really difficult to have in retrograde, just because they don't want to move backwards, or they don't want to slow down. Sagittarius is like very fast moving, right? Very fast paced and all about adventure and like getting straight to the point. With Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, there's also that judgmental quality about it, similar to Scorpio, but it's not so extreme in this case. I think with Mercury in Capricorn, the tendency here will be to shut themselves off to anything that seems colored by emotion, or just anything that just seems too subjective. And so that can include other people's opinions. So if you're sharing your opinion with a Mercury in Capricorn and they have it retrograde, they might be a little bit more dismissive about it, and they might just kind of dismiss your ideas as being like too fluffy, or like it's not real, it doesn't matter. They can also easily like dismiss anything that is not within tradition. They might easily dismiss ideas or concepts that are not tried and true, and they might be a little afraid to like branch out and like try new things and be creative. They are thinkers and communicators that need to like fact check first before making any kind of decision. They might not always take into account things or ideas that seem a little too crazy or out there. So that can prevent them sometimes from being open-minded. Now, with Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, the person might often feel misunderstood just because the way that they might present their ideas or their opinions or just express themselves might be easily misconstrued by other people. And it might be just because of like the words that they choose, and it can be difficult for them to express in like human terms, I guess, how they think and how they feel, and in ways that other people like are the mere humans of the world can easily understand. Because I see Mercury in Aquarius as being exalted, because we have Uranus, which is Aquarius's ruler, coming into contact with Mercury, and Uranus is actually the higher octave of Mercury. It's like taking normal everyday concepts and like learning methods and like applying the genius and creativity of Uranus to that. So I really like Mercury in Aquarius, and when it is retrograde, it's just harder for the person to bring their ideas down to reality and back down to earth. They might have their head too often in the clouds. As fantastic as their minds and ideas can be, and how as creative as they can be, and how as progressive as they can be, like it can be like too much for people to like really understand, or for them to really like apply it in today's in current terms, I guess you can say. With Mercury retrograde in Pisces, this is a pretty difficult position for Mercury in general, just because it is in detriment, and like Pisces does not really deal with facts and like what you can see on the surface. Like they're all about communicating spiritually and like poetically, and like their words and the way that they express themselves can seem a little fluffy, a little too hard to grasp, and just sort of elusive, basically. So with retrograde Mercury in Pisces, that can be even more so the case. It can just be even harder to express in concrete terms how they're feeling, and there might be a tendency to have less focus than normal, and it'll be easy for them to be distracted while trying to learn, and like their minds might be pulled in like many different directions at once. So it can be hard for them to concentrate and to like pick a side, know really like where they stand like firmly. With this placement, it can be even easier for confusion to happen, just because it can be difficult for Mercury and Pisces to really like grasp the hard evidence of things, or just like the harsh reality, like the cold hard facts of life. Deal with facts as they are presented in our reality. So I hope that gave you a little bit of a better understanding of Mercury retrograde and what it really means, in the middle of everybody just talking about Mercury retrograde. And like, I hope that gave you a little bit more information on what it means astrologically. And if you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate if you could give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy my content and want to learn more about astrology, if you could please subscribe as well. I would really appreciate that. I have a lot more videos coming soon, a lot more videos that I want to film that I have in mind. So please watch out for that. Stick around for that, and I'll see you again soon for another video.